Hello, how you doing? I'm Nick Hennegan, and these are the Maverick Theatre Diaries, or How to Make a Crisis Out of a Drama, the stream of consciousness diary that I wrote in 1997 when a play I'd also written called Ghost of a Chance won 4 awards. I wasn't sure how I was going to get it on, how we were going to produce it, because I was very poor and very new, and this was the stream of consciousness diary that I kept at the time with the sort of objective of releasing them, as it were, publishing them the very night of the opening of A Ghost of a Chance, which is in fact what we did. But it was a weird summer in 97. This is a weird summer in 2020. So I'm kind of reading them here. And we go back to my very first ever press conference at the Billesley pub, in Billesley in Birmingham. And we had a pack of about 30 press journos and photographers. And I was talking about Paul Henry. Paul Henry, of course, was well known for his starring role in the soap Crossroads. But as I wrote back then, I've actually known Paul Henry from a distance for many years. As a kid, I was in the Birmingham Scouts gang show, which was a tremendous event at the Birmingham Hippodrome. It ran for a week every year and was a huge part of my late childhood. I fortunately still have a poster from the first show I was in at the Birmingham Theatre, as the Hippodrome was then called for a while. I seem to remember disapproving of the name change. I thought the Birmingham Theatre was a much more modern name than the Hippodrome. The poster says the show ran for a week, commencing the 15th of December 1969, so I would have been about 10 or 11. The prices on the poster are fascinating too. Boxes cost 37 and 6 and 50 shillings, however much that is. I seem to remember 50 shillings being like a fortune at the time. That was for the boxes. The cheapest seats were 5 shillings, which I think is now 25 pence, 25p. The show was directed by Alan Coleman and the musical director was Peter Harris. Now, at the time, Alan Coleman was directing Crossroads for what was then ATV, and Peter Harris was the floor manager on, you guessed it, Crossroads, and also The Golden Shot with Bob Monkhouse. Working with 2 TV professionals was very attractive to a starry-eyed 11-year-old, and I think the whole of the Scout gang of about 150 people were all imbued with a sense of worth, because although we were all very amateur, although of various ages, these glamorous individuals were prepared to put their names to the show. Over a period of about 4 years, I became very friendly with Alan Coleman and his whole family, his children, Chris, Nick and Jackie. Chris was a year or so younger than me, Nick was 2 years younger than Chris, and Jackie was about 5 or 6 years old. I must have been quite good with kids even then, because I used to play with Jackie. I seem to remember her favourite game was Horsey, where I'd get down on all fours, she'd sit on my back and I'd do an impression of a bucking bronco. I also seem to remember that she'd want to keep me going to the point of exhaustion. For me, that is, not for Jackie. Every time I'd feel pooped, she'd jump up and down and shout, "Again, again!" Usually my salvation came in the shape of Barbara, Alan's lovely wife, who would pull Jackie off me and say, "Leave your boyfriend alone, he's exhausted." My sister Fiona was also very fond of the Colemans. Alan Coleman had a special way with children. We all adored him. We occasionally used to be invited to spend weekends at their house in Rushall Close in Walsall, and memories still linger. The house was very lovely, and by a canal we'd often would go for walks in the afternoon. I also vividly remember the very first time I saw colour television. That was at the Coleman's house. It was an exploding volcano in an episode of Voyage To The Bottom of the Sea, which was my favourite TV programme at the time. Alan was supplied with a colour set, of course, as part of his job for ATV, and I was captivated by the vivid, flashing images. Needless to say, poor Mom was nagged constantly by me after that about us getting a colour television. I started my kiddie nagging campaign almost instantly. Every time anything came on our black and white TV at home, I'd say, with a subtlety I felt would be completely subliminal, "That would look nice in colour, wouldn't it, Mum?" and look straight at her, all wide-eyed and innocent. Mum would sigh and agree. "Yes, Nick, it would, when we can afford it." Another vivid memory of the Colemans, and specifically Alan Coleman, was when Peter Harris and Alan were working on material for the gang show. Peter was at their house in Walsall playing the piano. They were writing lyrics to a song called Birmingham's Beautiful Bullring. They were both concentrating on the job in hand, but having a really good time, particularly when they created a funny line. I was about 12 years old and had been invited over for the weekend. I sat there in a comfortable sitting room, feeling slightly detached, but immensely enjoying watching the work in progress. Excuse me. I was not involved in any way. In fact, if anything, I was being ignored. But I felt good that they were both relaxed and focused, and perhaps most importantly, the fact that they were ignoring me meant my presence there was totally accepted. I was accepted by these two adults whom I admired so much. Acceptance, I think, is a large part of a happy childhood. When I was sent to bed that night, remember bedtimes, the scourge of every child, I can remember lying in the clean, fresh sheets upstairs and listening to Alan and Peter singing downstairs and drifting off to sleep with a completely warm, contented feeling. All was well with the world, and so was my place in it. The relationship between the Colemans and the Hennegans was a good, if occasional, part of life in the early 70s. One New Year's Eve, Mum and Dad had been invited by Alan and Barbara Coleman to a dinner dance party to sing in the new year. Remember dinner dances? We'd usually go out as a family, but on this occasion Fiona and I were excluded as the party was at a licensed premises, over 18s only, and so Bob, my older brother, was lumbered again with the job of babysitting. I think the venue was a hotel somewhere on the Coventry Road. We made our usual kiddie protestations about being left out, but it was a very rare occasion for Mum and Dad to go out on their own, so we'd settled in for a New Year's Eve with the telly. And with Mum and Dad gone, it meant we could stay up late, maybe even till midnight. I was using my, to my mind, subtle powers of persuasion on Bob to get him to allow us to stay up and see the New Year in, when suddenly there was a knock on the front door. Bob answered it, and there was Alan Coleman. "Get your glad rags on," said Alan. "They are allowing children into the party after all." Wild. We were ready in about 3 nanoseconds, and Alan drove us to the hotel in his new Ford Capri. Very swish in those days, I can tell you. We arrived at the party and were treated like long-lost returnees from some sort of prison camp. I couldn't know it at the time, but as most of the adults had all had a few drinks by the time we arrived, they were very relaxed and very magnanimous. We were showered with attention and Coca-Cola. I seem to remember that was the first time Mum tried to show me how to waltz. She's tried every now and again over subsequent years, and I've never really picked it up. There are very few occasions now where I could use my waltzing skills, which is just as well. There was another notable moment with Alan Coleman when he showed me just how cool he was. I and a few of the other guys were in the gents' loo at another party. I was the only boy there, but most of the adults were sort of taking no notice. Then I noticed the condom machine on the wall. Feeling very grown up being with the men in a men-only environment, I was about 12, I think, I made small urinal talk. Being as manly and grown up as I could, I said to Alan Coleman, "Pah, look at that flipping machine on the wall," and nodded my head in the direction of the condom dispenser. I seem to remember now that Alan blushed slightly. Yes, he replied. "Yes," I said, proud that my obviously adult repartee had allowed us to connect intellectually. "It's ridiculous, isn't it?" "What's ridiculous?" asked Alan as he moved to the sink to wash his hands. "That machine," I said as I followed him to the hand basin. "You tell me, Alan, why would any pub want to put a chewing gum dispenser on the wall of a gent's toilet?" I seem to remember being very puzzled at the shaking shoulders and snorts and guffaws that came from the other blokes, the adults in the gents. Alan was more gracious. Stifling a smile, he said, "Well, yes, good point, Nick. Why don't you ask your dad?" Still curious about the illogical reaction to my obviously quite logical statement and question, I was on my way to do just that when an older friend intercepted me and explained the real purpose of the condom machine. I was vaguely horrified but very curious. It was to be another year or so before I actually saw one of these magical objects at school. Strangely, I remember I was chewing gum at the time I first saw it. The connection with Crossroads continued through the gang show. Often members of the cast would be in the audience at the Hippodrome, and on a number of occasions they'd come on stage on the last night to sing in the final numbers. Big sing-along. I remember being amazed at how normal they all looked in real life. Although knowing them from television, obviously I used to try and watch Crossroads whenever I could, especially if Alan was directing. It also made me feel grown up watching an adult programme. The whole cast seemed to have a magical air about them, especially Amy Turtle. She was lovely. Although the one member of the cast of Crossroads I especially remember was Noel Gordon. She always seemed a real star with fur coats and chauffeurs, and she was always kindly to us kids. Years later, in fact, when I was on the radio at BRMB, a friend approached me about finding a celebrity to open a charity fireworks party, again for the Scouts, the local Scouts. The venue was a muddy field in Hall Green, Birmingham. Nolly had just finished Crossroads. I remember Meg Richardson sailing off to a new life in Australia even now. And it was suggested I might ask her. I suggested it. The charity organiser was delighted with my suggestion. Nolly was hot news in the UK due to her departure from Crossroads, and as she was about to open in her first theatrical production since leaving Crossroads, Call Me Madam, at the Alexandra Theatre I think it was, I thought she might be able to use the occasion perhaps as a promotional trip for the show. She was always great friends with Les Ross, the legendary breakfast show DJ, who was also my mate. So Les gave me her number and I called her at home. She readily agreed to do the gig, which I loved. So I arranged time and agreements. She was due to arrive at 7 p.m. and stay until 7:30. I was very keen that the evening went smoothly for her because I knew from my own experience of being a minor celeb at BRMB, excuse me, she would have hundreds of requests for appearances. I think she was doing me a favour by agreeing, so I made sure the organisers were aware she would need looking after. They were completely cooperative and did everything I suggested. At 7 o'clock, I was on the road at the entrance to the Scouts field, and sure enough, bang on time, this huge Daimler slid into the street. Instantly, there was a problem. The entrance to the field was too small for the Daimler to get down. A fall at the first hurdle. But Noel Gordon was unfazed. The rear electric window slid down, and I explained the problem. "Oh, don't worry, darling," she said. "I'll walk." She nodded to her chauffeur, who instantly jumped out of the car and opened the door for her. Nolly slid out, looking for all the world like she was about to attend an Oscar ceremony in Hollywood, not a small charity bonfire party for Scouts in downtown Hall Green, Birmingham. Then, to my amazement, without a word being spoken, her uniformed driver sprang to the rear of the car, opened the boot, and inside this massive boot was just one pair of black Wellingtons. He placed the Wellingtons on the floor. Again, without a word, Nolly leaned on her driver, removed her slim, elegant high heels and put the wellies on. The driver placed her shoes in the boot, removed a torch and escorted her down the muddy track to the field. She announced the party open and spent the next 3 hours talking to everyone and going round the stalls. She was due to leave at 7:30 and eventually took her leave at 10 p.m, leaving everyone with the very real feeling they'd been in the presence of a star. When Noel Gordon sadly died some years later, the image that instantly came to my mind was Nolly in her jewellery, long fur coat and black wellies, throwing wooden balls at coconut shies to raise money for the local Scouts. What a legend. Alan Coleman knew I was madly keen on the telly, and he used to invite me to shoots and on occasion to sit in the director's gallery at the ATV studios while Crossroads was being recorded. His spell over youngsters was obviously noted by the powers that be at ATV because Lew Grade, I think it was, made him head of children's entertainment. Our friendship with the Colemans ended quite abruptly when an Australian gentleman by the name of Reg Grundy came to the UK in about 1974 and promptly snapped up most of the creative talent from ATV to go back to Oz to create a new drama strand for his production company. The results of that brain drain can be seen on your telly today. Neighbours, Shortland Street, Young Doctors, et al. I would not see any of the Colemans for over 12 years, although Chris missed the UK. Chris was Alan's oldest son, and he'd come back for holidays and we became friends all over again. He would often crash at my tiny flat, and I finally ended up employing him for about a year in the late 1980s to help me run my promotional events company, Sharp Images. We were doing a lot of store openings for Saatchi & Saatchi and other blue chip companies. And spookily, Alan's brother, Rick Coleman, is deputy head of Baverstock School near King's Heath, and both he and his wife Anne are regular supporters of Maverick's pub theatre. I actually spoke to Alan 2 weeks ago as he's in the UK running workshops for actors who need help adjusting to performing in nightly or thrice weekly dramas, fast turnover dramas, soap operas. But of course, we're both grown up now, so the magic has almost gone. But I still got on really well with him, and I shall forever be fond of the Colemans. They gave me some very fun memories and experiences as a boy. Alan Coleman is probably the reason I'm doing what I'm doing now, and I'll always be indebted to him for the precious gift of his time.